introductions as usual. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to this Friday's webinar from Annika Digital. It's myself and Katie this morning.
Hi, everyone.
Morning. So what we're going to do is we're going to dive straight in and go through the results of the survey. I've hit the record button so that you'll be able to get the recording later. We aren't going to run a poll this morning because, of course, I'm talking about lots of results anyway. So I thought we were probably a little bit all polled out. But what I will do is I'm going to sort of just start with the key findings and then go through each of the slides of the results. So let's get going then. So first of all, a little about the survey. This is the key findings from 2022. So we had exactly the same number of respondents as last year, which was 90. It's remarkably difficult to get people to fill in surveys. I didn't realise it was so difficult. I thought last year it was because it was, we were a little bit late to the party and didn't really spend too much time advertising it because we were into the beginning of 21. But interestingly, we spent a lot more time this time and we're still finding it difficult to get huge numbers. So I think this is just a reflection of the fact that everybody's really busy. But we did get a really good mix of numbers of employees and revenue. So it's quite a representative sample. So you'll be able to see companies of a similar size to yourself. And it's quite interesting to see that mix. We've also got a lot of different sectors covered as well. And we've got lots of different services, products. We've got quite a lot of software companies this time. We always get a lot of charities and we've got lots of different routes to market. So the majority of them, I think about 85-90% had a website or said that they had a website, but lots of people have got sales agents as well. And we've also got quite a few people that use other methods like third-party agents, trade desks, etc. The actual capabilities varied considerably. There's a lot of in-house teams, quite a few individuals working either on their own or with a team. And then there's quite a lot of outsourced resources as well. So again, quite a variety of different sizes of teams. And because we've got some really big companies as well, we've got some quite big teams of more than 10 people, but a lot of one-man bands and, self-employed as well. So it's a real mix. 16% said they didn't have a website or they didn't mention that they had a website. And we did have a large number that actually had a sales team, because obviously we're talking a lot of services in this case, or used a mix of online and offline marketing. So a real mix. With regards to the actual knowledge and performance of the channels, it's really, really mixed again. But there's a real, we're seeing this a lot with the surveys that we do and the other research that we do. There's a real tendency and focus around what we would call owned and earned media. So this is the more traditional content marketing, email marketing, SEO, organic social media, the sorts of things, basically getting the website right, the creativity, the branding, those are really, really strong. But when you look at things like paid channels, especially stuff like TV, marketplaces, which is Amazon, they're not being used or they're not applicable or they're really poor. So I think there's a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy going on here. Because a lot of the time the marketing teams don't have the knowledge and they seem to be quite risk averse and aren't trying these things. Or what's happening is that they're outsourcing the more difficult stuff. So it's interesting to see that hasn't changed very much. However, there are some channels which I would have expected to be much more popular. Things like marketing automation, which are particularly designed. This is things like HubSpot, Marketo, SharpSwing that we use, and conversion optimization, which is about improving the performance of your website. They're just underused or underperforming, and there just seems to be a lack of investment in these areas. And that does concern me a little bit because that's how you get a lot of the competitive advantage, particularly when you're selling services or B2B. So I do think that that's an area that people need to look at to see what they're actually doing. The size and the income of the organisation isn't a particularly good indicator of the knowledge or skills or the channels used, etc. And I think the reason is there's a bit of a polarization. You can be really, really small and can't afford to, haven't got the time, so you outsource it to a freelancer, or you can be, a lot bigger and do the same thing. So there seems to be sort of a group of people that when you're really tiny, you have to do everything yourself. But there's other, particularly e-commerce websites, I think they tend to outsource quite early on. So there's not a sort of a straight line relationship between the sort of the size of the organization and the activities. One of the other good things about all this is that many organizations intend to increase their overall activities, planning, brand awareness, lead generation and sales. And there's lots of people intending to do a lot more this year than they were doing last year. And that was also predicted when we did the survey last year as well. And I definitely can see that increase has happened. The budget of 1 to 5% was the most common, but last year it was significantly higher. So people are definitely spending more or allocating a bigger proportion. And you'll see that in the next slide as well. So I've just picked up on the main differences, and I've not included the 2021 slides except for a couple of specific examples. So I'm only really going to show you the 22 slides. But the main things that we saw was that we did have slightly a bigger proportion of the survey was completed by what we call micro businesses. That's less than 10. So either self-employed or employing 1 to 10 people. Now, interestingly, the business community in most of the Midlands, most of the UK, is about 96%. And it was nowhere near that many. It was more like sort of 60%. So we still did get a good represented sample across the bigger companies as well. This time there was less businesses selling services. It was over 2/3 last time, and there was a much bigger mix of combinations. And what I mean by that was things like there was more charities, there was more SaaS, software as a service, technology companies, and also more that were doing e-commerce and services or lead generation. There was just a bit more of a mix. There was lots of combinations. So, you can't really classify businesses as lead generation or e-commerce anymore. They're definitely, in a lot of cases, doing more than one thing. And in the same way that they're selling to B2B and B2C as well. So the mix of different types of businesses really grown. And I guess that's because people have had to diversify. Previously, if you were a retailer, you wouldn't have considered, you'd got a physical shop or a cafe or something, you wouldn't have necessarily considered e-commerce. And you can definitely see that evolution of businesses that have taken on different routes to market. There was lots of mentions of TikTok, AI and events, both virtual and live. So we noticed that you'll see this in some of the word maps later on. But there's definitely a diversification of ideas. When we did the survey last year, it was a little bit risk adverse, to be honest. People weren't mentioning many different, when I said, what emerging channels or what emerging technologies are of interest to you, we didn't really get that many people responding, whereas to this time there was, nearly everybody was contributing to that section. And again, this lack of capability around paid media and the more technical techniques like paid search, conversion rate optimization and marketing automation does concern me a little bit. I just don't think there's enough detailed training going on in that. And although we're doing quite general training at the moment, our vision for the next year is to do some real hands-on, intense, advanced practical training over sort of a 10-day period. So on a specific topic. So, a whole 2 weeks on paid media, whole 2 weeks on SEO and content, 2 weeks on analytics and tracking, 2 weeks on social media. And I definitely can see that, this is going to hold people back. Last year, paid search was much more polarized. People were either not doing it at all or were really active. And it seems to be a little bit more, less people really going after it. And I think this is a reflection of the sort of size. The micro businesses are less likely to do paid media because they don't have the budgets. And so I think that's probably why, if you've only got £5,000 or £10,000 to spend across the whole year, it's very little to actually spend on paid media. So I think that's probably what is putting people off. Budgets were generally bigger in proportion to last year, so you saw a lot more people that were prepared to invest 6 to 10% rather than just 1 to 5%. And you have got a few businesses that were really going for it, 25%. And that tends to be things like the SaaS projects where once you get the client, then, you get that extra revenue because you've just got the margins. And there was a lot more lot more activity around traditional media and possibly events. So what we noticed was a bigger proportion of the budget was actually going to non-digital, which was a bit of a surprise. I guess what's happened is people spent so much money on digital last year. And now that events and other offline activities are available, I think there's a bit of an investment back into those events. Okay, so let's just summarize with a bit more about the actual respondents then. So, as I said, there was 90 altogether. And this is to sort of show the mix of the turnover and number of staff. So the big blue chunk here is the businesses that were under 100,000. And then the blue is the self-employed, and this red here is the 1 to 10. So the micro businesses are pretty much 60% in this case, which, compared with industry at large, that's 96%. So I guess we do have quite a lot of clients that are bigger than micro businesses. So it doesn't really surprise me that we've got a bigger proportion. The other thing is that, we have got some really big businesses as well. So there's a number of businesses that are, over the million mark. So the million is the orange and above the million is here. So about a third of the businesses were over $1 million turnover. Now, the interesting thing is when you combine those two and have this graph, now there are a couple of outliers. So there's, so if I just explain how this chart is put together. So these are the businesses by size. So you've got your 12 self-employed who are all doing less than 100,000. And then you've got your 1 to 10 businesses. And you can see that the turnover of the 1 to 10 businesses, the majority of them are less than 100,000, but you have got some as high as 2.5 million. Now, that is likely to be some e-commerce websites where they're shifting a lot of product because it's very, or SaaS products, where you don't actually need a lot of staff, but you can actually move quite a lot of products, and therefore the revenue is quite high. When you get into the 11 to 50 mark, which is obviously where Annika sits, you can see you've got a huge range. You've got a small number that are doing less than 100,000. I mean, that is a little bit concerning. I think they're going to, if you divide that by, that many staff, they're not going to be making that much money. And it could be that these are the charities or some of the other types of businesses. And then at the other end, you've got somebody that's one business that's doing 51 to 100 million. So as I said, there's a few outliers like this one and this one. So this is 250 to 500 staff, and the turnover is less than 100,000. I was going to try and find out from the data what that was. I think it's something like a charity. I have checked that I've entered the information correctly, but it could be that somebody's clicked on the wrong button, because that does seem a little bit unusual, that one. And then as you get to the larger turnovers, you do see that the size of the business increases as well. So it does sort of migrate across to the right. But overall, 35 out of the 53 of those micro businesses did have a turnover of less than 100,000. So you have got this sort of little cluster down at the bottom here. But 32 out of 37 organisations that employed more than 10 people, so this is this lot here, they had a turnover of more than $1 million. So you can see you've got the sort of 8 and to the right. 14% of the organisations actually had a turnover of 5 million. And there was a couple of universities in there, you know, some quite big organisation. There was a couple of our clients, like I think Domino and Experian were in there as well. So that's obviously putting up the average as well. So when we look at the turnover and number of staff this year versus last year, this is 2021, you'll see that from the point of view of the turnover, 56 or nearly 57% of them were less than $1 million, and 54% were over $1 million. And then from a size perspective, 43% were micro businesses and 56% were 11 or more. Now, if you then compare that with the 2022 figures, I did actually add an extra category in. So the figures aren't quite the same. This is because SMEs are based on up to 250. And I also wanted to split it out a little bit. So the information is a little bit more granular this year. And similarly, I've added an extra category from here as well. So you can see that I've got 51 to 100 million and then 100 million plus. So what you notice is this, you know, there's more outliers this time, you know, these odd ones, whereas last year it was a bit more of a direct correlation. But you can see we had 71% of businesses with a turnover of less than $1 million this time, compared with 56 last time. And we had 58% of the businesses were micro businesses compared with 43% last time. So we definitely got a slightly larger proportion of smaller businesses. Now, I think the reason for this is that we're currently running the DMI course, which is the 12-week training course. And anybody's interested, we are running another one in April. So if you want to message Katie, she'll put her email list in the chat. We are definitely, you know, going to be recruiting again. But I think because of that, we did have quite a few people that filled in the form or the survey that were from the DMI, and a lot of those guys are slightly smaller businesses as well. So that may have distorted the figures slightly. Okay, locations then. So I used a slightly different mapping tool this time. It's really difficult to get these mapping tools. It took me longer to try and find one than it did to actually do the analysis. So basically I put the the postcodes in, and we've got 82 respondents that were mapped. That was just that there was a couple of odd postcodes that were entered. There were 2 that were definitely from outside the UK. There was a couple that I wasn't quite sure from the postcode and the details that we got, but there was definitely 2 that were from international. And you can see, as expected, most of the work that we do is in the Midlands. So there's a big cluster around the Midlands. Then there's a few sort of Wales and the south, and then we've got one up in Scotland there. Again, because we're based in Leicester, most of our network's in Leicester. We had 33% of the respondents were in Leicester. Again, that sort of reflects also the DMI course, which I think is over 50% from Leicestershire. And that's Leicester and Nottingham rather than just Leicester, sorry. And then next most common is Nottingham, Derby and Lincoln. So this isn't really too much of a surprise. And it really just reflects, you know, where most of our contacts are. With regard to what they actually sell, I haven't done all of the different combinations this year because it was really complicated. But we've got 30 that just sell services on their own, 15 that just sell products, and then both products and services was 18, and then a whole load of other combinations. So the combinations included things like charities, software as a service, and so these are the numbers. So 71% sold services, but that could be alone or in combination, and 40% sold products, again in loan or in combination. And then I've just got the percentages here. So if you go to the next table, you can see the actual numbers, and this is the different, and that matches the different colours over there. So yeah, we often get a few charities involved, but some of them were services and charities, or products and charities. So you can see we ended up with quite a big number of combinations there. So there were actually more charities than that, but that was just charities that didn't mention anything else. These were the sectors. So last year we also had a lot of marketing. It was actually more. It's about 25%. It's really interesting that we have a lot of agencies and freelancers that actually come onto our webinars, which is quite a nice compliment. We had a lot more technology and software this year. A few membership organisations. That's things like we work with the Chartered Institute of Procurement. We've got the Chamber. People like that. D2N2, the LEP, etc. Manufacturing was definitely down this year compared with last year, but you can see that you've got the range of the different sectors. Now, the sector doesn't really give you indication of whether they're selling products or services. So when I split it by services, split by sector, you can see the mix here. So marketing and advertising was, I've just copied the graph across from before, was 15 of the people that was of the organisations that were selling services, and as it goes down, and then of the people that were selling products, so you've got 18 and 15 altogether, and then some from the different combinations. You can see that technology and software was the biggest, then manufacturing. So it was a little bit more spread, diverse mix of people in products. And that sort of quite a few of those were doing the e-commerce, but not necessarily. Some of the high value products were like home and garden. They weren't necessarily e-commerce websites. Then with regards to who they sell to, again, we've got a bit of a mix here. So we've got 62 organisations that sold to B2B. But again, this was either, approximately half of those were just B2B, and then the rest were mixed. Then we got, these were the business to consumers, and then both. And then again, we've got a bit of a mix as well. So if you look at the data, we also got a few not-for-profit organisations. That may reflect the fact that we've been doing a lot more not-for-profit work. We've been doing a lot of work at the university, with the council, with Bid Leicester, with quite a few tourism organisations from around the country. So I think that's why we've got a larger number of not-for-profit combinations. But you can see it's definitely sort of 2/3 approximately services, 2/3 for B2B, but it's not the same 2/3. It's definitely a mix. So when you look at what they're doing, they're not always it's not always the B2B people that are selling services. You could be doing B2B and selling products as well. So it's a real mix. Another thing I wanted to investigate was how people were basically selling. So this is routes to market. So 1/3 of the people just had a website. So 30% just had a website. And then 42% had their own staff, but they could have had a website and they could have used other routes as well. And then the final sort of nearly 1/3 was where there wasn't a sales staff, but they used other combinations. So it's quite a complicated matrix of the different combinations. So I'll just go through it one at a time. So there was 27 people that just had a website and didn't use anything at all, anything else. So 15 of those were lead generation sites, 6 were e-commerce, 4 had both, and then 2 either had a SaaS or a charity website, depending on what they wrote down. Then these were the ones that had sales staff and used another route. So these were just sales staff. These were with a website. These are a combination of sales staff and third-party distributors, and then other combinations. So that was actually the biggest group. And I think that just reflects the fact that, 2/3 of the people are B2B and 2/3 are selling services. No sales staff that used other routes. So this was just combinations of all the others. and then you get your total to 90 altogether. 18%, I think I may have got that wrong on the first slide, but 18% didn't mention that they had a website. So I'll edit that before sticking it on social media. Okay, I think we're getting to 9:30 now, so I'm expecting a few more people to appear. I know that Katie's put in a few comments. So if you have just arrived, I do apologise. The timing was set wrong on the webinar, and we didn't really notice until after the reminders went out. So you will be able to get the video later on of everything that you've missed. So the next thing is understanding who's doing the marketing. And what's interesting about this is that most people ticked more than one box. So what that means is that you might have, in the case of 24 individuals, which was the person that was actually completing the box. But in addition to that, there was another 16 that was an individual, but also had a team or using an agency or a freelancer. So there was a lot of different combinations again. So the highest, so of the 28 organizations with a dedicated team, so these are these guys here that have got a dedicated team, 79% or 22 of them employed 10 or more staff. So you only start to see a dedicated team really once you reach about 10 or more. You know, it's not really the micro businesses that have got a dedicated team. And then of the 24 companies that outsource to a third party, either to a freelancer or an agency, the number of staff didn't really have that much of an effect. So although having a dedicated team was definitely an indication of scale, using outsourcing wasn't. Because in the case of these 24, 10 of them were employed or 10 employed less than 10 people and 5 employed more than 250. So there's not really a very good correlation between people using agencies and freelancers and size, but there is a good correlation between having a dedicated team and size. So you can see that there. So we've got a couple of people that either didn't complete any information or they've not, they've not got any marketing, or they've left it blank. You've got the biggest majority were people that are responsible for marketing themselves, but they may get support. As I said, they may get support from someone else. And then you've got a whole range of people with different sizes of teams. You've got quite a big chunk of people, 14, where it's somebody else's role, and this could be an office manager or even the CEO or something. So that is interesting, because these people that potentially will need to employ a marketeer, or that person's role will evolve. And then generally the people that are using freelancers or agencies are doing something else. So you can see you've got these quite a big number here. Now, this was an interesting one. As you know, we're doing lots of training at marketing at the moment. And what we found, that 56% of the businesses that responded said they've either got non-existent, poor, or just acceptable levels of marketing skills, which is over half, really. So that is quite worrying, that you've got so many businesses that consider their marketing to be sort of at the poorer end. Now, of that, 10 out of the 22 had a turnover of $1 million. So it was not an indication of size if you've got an acceptable marketing. So a lot of the bigger companies were not really that happy with the levels of skills and knowledge within their organization. Now, if you compare that with the group which considered their marketing knowledge excellent or very good, this is the blue group over there, that was only 15 or 16%. And there was little impact on the size of the turnover. But we did notice that 53% of them had their dedicated team. And as we know, the dedicated team isn't a direct correlation with size anyway. So what that means is that the ones that have got a dedicated team, they're generally happy or consider their skills to be pretty good. But there are still a huge number of people that need to upskill their in-house knowledge, which is obviously something we're very passionate about. Okay, so this is an interesting one. This is the capability by channel. The way that I've stacked this. So if I do two examples, this is branding, design, and creative. So very few people thought that was non-applicable. That's the red. Very few, less than 5%, thought that they had no knowledge at all. Your next one is they've got basic skills. You've got a few that have started to use, but you can see that a good 75% have either got skills in-house to implement, are highly proficient, or they could be using an external agency. So if you compare that at the other end of the spectrum with digital TV and radio, you've got nearly 25% said it's not applicable. Another sort of 30% said no knowledge, and then a tiny number that are green, which are got some skills in-house or regard themselves as proficient. So this is sort of like a sliding scale of what channels people have got the capability in-house. And then when you look at it from a perspective of those specific channels, you'll see that these are the ones that no knowledge or training is required. So these are the ones where, and I think this also includes the ones where it's not applicable at all as well, is, digital TV, radio, marketing automation, conversion rate optimization, paid display, marketplaces. So these are the ones where no knowledge or training. I think I actually took out the where it's not applicable data. And you can generally see that these are the ones where there's a lack of capabilities. And what surprises me is I sort of expect it for digital TV, marketing automation, and marketplaces, because this is only going to apply to certain people. But marketing automation and conversion rate optimization, SEO, paid search, digital PR, they apply to nearly everybody. And yet the capabilities are still pretty poor. And I think what this means is in a lot of cases, a lot of the organizations that have completed the survey, they're just so much stronger in the owned and earned area around, design, email, content, some of the even traditional. But interestingly, video production had came up higher than some of these other ones, and so did analytics. So it's quite surprising where the capabilities are. And it's also interesting that video is getting a mention, which it didn't last year. So I think there's definitely a shift in what people are doing, but I don't think it's happening fast enough to bring in these skills that, I would consider pretty important for most businesses. I mean, it's great for us as an agency that offers these skills, these services, because of course we can do work on behalf of other people. But it does concern me that so many organizations don't really have this capability in-house. What you see then as an agency, these were the services that people tended to outsource to. So it's not really surprising. Web design and development, there's very specific skills. You don't have to do it very often. So you can see it doesn't really surprise me that web design and development is people do say they're using an agency. And again, the sorts of paid display, branding, designing, and search engine optimization. I mean, there's a lot of agencies that offer these services, so that isn't really very surprising. But a lot of the others, people weren't even considering using an agency at all. Okay, so let's have a look at the actual marketing channels that were being used. So again, this sort of reflects capability to a certain extent. The lists that are most popular fall into a similar pattern. So again, organic, social, web design, branding, content marketing. These are the ones that are being used and have got the highest amount of green. CRM surprised me. That comes up really high, and analytics comes up really high. I'm guessing if you've got a marketing team, you will be using those quite a lot. But you can see the same old things like paid, CRO, push right to the bottom. So again, there's some real opportunities here. And I can understand why these ones are not so popular. This is why I split them out this time, because these just don't apply to such a lot of people. But, to say that conversion rate optimization doesn't apply to you, I'm assuming that means you're not really using the website, because trying to improve the effectiveness of your website is really important. And again, marketing automation, most people are using that as selling services. But if you've only got a trade desk, or you sell via other retailers, that might not apply to you. So again, most popular channels pretty much follows the same pattern as capabilities. Probably the exception is CRM. That really is probably a reflection on the fact that so many businesses had a sales team, which is over a third. So you would expect them to have a CRM system. And then when you go to the ones that were never used, it's following the same sort of pattern of these ones up here. And paid, and again, traditional marketing. There's quite a lot of people that weren't using traditional at all as well. That's things like events, leaflets, exhibitions, etc. So which ones worked the best? It's becoming a little bit predictable. The ones where you've got the capabilities, the ones where you're using, tend to be the ones where it's working the best. So in this case, what I've done is I've done the order based on, not applicable, not done by us, or poor. And you can see that it's following a very similar pattern. Now, paid search is a bit of a surprise, really, because some organizations totally rely on it. So paid search and the paid media is generally falling off the bottom of the chart. And again, CRM, even though a lot of people using it, they're not necessarily happy with it. So I think that might be a training and capability issue there as well. So very good and excellent. Again, it's all the traditional stuff: design, creative, content marketing, but videos in there, which I'm really pleased. It's great. And I think this is just because of the rise of organic social. To me, these two are almost linked. So there's a much better emphasis on video than that was hardly mentioned at all last year. And I think that's supporting both content marketing and social media. And, again, this is following the same patterns as before. Digital TV, marketplaces, they're not really getting mentioned. But some of these others, like marketing automation and conversion rate optimization, I just don't think people know what they are. I definitely recommend, if you don't really understand what marketing automation, I did a webinar on it about 3 weeks ago. It's really email Mark II, hyper supersonic email, plus a load of CRM functionality. So if you're using CRM and you're using email, you should really be migrating over to marketing automation. So I definitely think that's something that people need to look at. Conversion rate optimization, we're going to be doing something on that in the next couple of months. But I definitely think, again, that's something that if you can improve your website, you don't need to drive more traffic if your website converts at a better rate. Okay, so let's go over to business objectives. This is really positive news. Obviously, when we did this a year ago, there was a lot of people still trying to recover from the effects of COVID. So what I've done is I put them in order of percentages, but I put the others together at the bottom. So 62% wanted to take advantage of new opportunities and growth. These do add up to more than 100, because obviously people can tick more than one box. Another 31% wanted to grow moderately, 1 to 20%. 30% wanted to grow, 20 to 50%. Another 20% said business as usual, carry on doing what you're doing. There's still another 20% trying to recover. So if any of you are in that situation and need some help, I was quite surprised as to how big that number was. I know we got a few tourism sectors in there, but if any of you want to message me and Katie and, you really are still struggling, please let us know and we'll see if we can, give you an hour's consultancy or something just to help out. So if you haven't got back to, where you were before COVID hit, then we definitely want to try and help you. And again, with the ones that are still trying to survive and keep afloat, so that they may overlap actually, but potentially that's as high as a third. So that is quite worrying still. And of course, we don't know what's happening next. There's a threat of recession from inflation. We've got the situation with Ukraine, which everybody's obviously very, very worried about. So I do think that although there was a lot of optimism in this, people may have to scale back their expectations if people stop buying as much as they were. And we even had 7% of people that want to grow more than 50%. There was a small number around, this is the first time we've asked this question about selling overseas, another 7% as well. So, and then others, there was a few other things which were very specific to the individual business. So I was, although it's a little bit polarized, it's sort of, a third of people are still having some problems. There was 2/3 nearly that were really going for it to varying degrees. So it is still a bit of a mixed bag, and I haven't done the analysis whether that's sector specific, but I would like to sort of put a bit of a call out for anybody that's still really struggling and see if we can do anything to help you. Okay, slightly different color coding on this one. Sorry, it's a little bit strange, but these were the marketing objectives for next year. And this is in order of the people that want to do an important and most important. So you can see that win new customers, over 80% said it's important or more. Improve efficiency, that came up really highly as well. Maintain or increase marketing share, we can tell that from the previous, that's around the 60%. Promote new products and services, again, about 60% of the people said that that's important to them. Better measurement, analytics, and reporting. I think this is more an indication that quite a lot of people have already done some of this stuff. Improve customer services. That had quite a big not applicable, and also quite a few have done already. Other routes to market, again, a lot of people considering it, but not necessarily going for it yet. Enter new markets or locations, that wasn't quite as popular. And then invest in new technology, and that does worry me slightly, because you've got less than 50%, so only about 40% of people that think this is important or a priority. So, I mean, it's quite scary the amount of money we spend on software. We spend well over 5% of our income. In fact, we spend as much on software, technology software, as we do on marketing. So we have a budget of 5% of revenue, but we also have another budget of around, it's just over 5% on software costs. So I do think people need to look at that, because there are often a lot of the software that you use can save you a lot of time, and it's often a time-money equation. But Matt did a presentation on some software tools a couple of weeks ago, and some of the software is free. So it might be just a lack of awareness of what's out there. So I definitely think it's worth having a look at that webinar. Perhaps, Katie, you could put that link in the chat, please, for anybody that might want to go and have a look at Matt's webinar on software. Require or replace customers lost through COVID. You can see for quite a lot of people that's not applicable, or they've already done that. But you can see that it's still just over 50% are still thinking about it or may want to do it. So, that is still a number that we need to be a little bit concerned about. About a third of the people, it's still important to them. And then the other was just a catch-all category, so it's not really surprising that so many people said that doesn't apply to them. Okay. So marketing objectives then, so new customer acquisition, improving performance, etc. These are the ones that had important, most important, or a priority. This was the order there. And then done already on no importance, require replace customers, invest in new technology. That one does worry me a little bit, because I do think that some of you definitely need to look at that. This is a nice simple one. The advantage of using Google Forms, which is what we use to collect this information, is that some of the graphics come straight off of it. So you can see that 75% wanted to increase, 85% said they wanted to increase revenue, 65% said they wanted to grow profit, nearly 50% said they were going to increase staff, which is great news. Marketing staff increased 30%. If any of you have got any vacancies, please let us know. Part of the DMI training is to try and act as a matchmaker. We've got a lot of really skilled people that are doing some brilliant training at the moment, and a lot of them are looking for jobs. Also, we've got a lot of students and people looking for apprenticeships. So if any of you have any job opportunities, or you're looking to upskill your team, please let Katie know. Increased budget was 35%. Increased local or regional sales, 20%. Increased national sales, 25%. And increased international sales, 18%. So lots and lots of people really quite proactive, wanting to do more. This was not all of the different ones that I picked out, but this was the ones with the most activity, where they're going to do more of it. So overall level of marketing so these are the ones with the highest purple, and these were sort of nearly as high as 80% in some cases. So overall level of marketing activity, more owned and earned media. Now that doesn't surprise me, because that's what everybody else is doing anyway. More campaigns to increase brand awareness, more campaigns to get traffic to website, more campaigns for sales and leads, more conversions in other words, and improve customer retention and advocacy. So generally, most people wanting to spend, do more activity rather than less. On the budgets then, so this was 21 versus 22, and this is the data we got last year. You can see the key at the bottom. So most people, nearly 50%, were only spending, 12% were spending nothing, and nearly 50% were spending 1 to 5%. And they said in the future they were going to spend more. So there was a lot of them said that they weren't going to spend as much. A lot less said they weren't spending anything at all. So at least they were allocating a budget. But if you look at that, that's nearly 2/3 between 1 and 10%. And that was the prediction for 21. Now, what actually happened was, of the people, this is not the same people. So it's a different sample. Some of them are the same, but we still ended up with 20% saying that they didn't have a marketing budget, which is probably a reflection of the fact we've got more smaller people this year. But a good 37%, 1 to 5%, and 22%, 1 to 6%. So it's still sort of nearly 2/3, or just under 2/3, are between 1 and 10%. Now, if you project forward to what people want to spend in 22, you've got a similar pattern happening. They're all saying they're going to spend more, but when we look at next year, it might be that they didn't spend as much as they were going to. So a lot more people saying that they're going to allocate. So this is definitely a bigger proportion of people are going to be spending between 1 and 10%, and a bigger proportion between 6 and 10%, which is good. It means people are going to invest more. They want to grow. And if you look at the things that they want to do, they're going to need the budgets to do that. You're not going to be able to grow awareness and conversions without spending more money. So what we did then was analyze. I did the analysis in a couple of ways, but I wanted to show you where there was a significant difference. This was based on turnover. So I've got the same graph as before, but what I've done this time is I've spread the budget over the different across the blue bars, and then I've got the different sizes of the business. So you can see the majority of the people that haven't got a budget are the smaller business with less than 100,000 turnover. There was this very strange outlier. This was actually these were the universities. Now, it seems crazy that universities don't have a budget, but it could be that the person that completed the form is in a team that do organic or content, and they rely on that to get their marketing. So just because you haven't got budget doesn't mean to say you're active, because you're only spending budget on paid advertising. And you can see from the responses that the majority of the people are actually doing mainly organic and owned and earned. But what you do see is that some of the bigger businesses, when you look at these 1 to 5, it's pretty spread. But then when you look at these larger, so there's not really a very good correlation between budgets and revenue. I think it relates more to the type of business. You can see here the businesses that are doing less than 100,000, they're represented in all of those. So if you're a SaaS business and you make all your money after the first month, then you're going to spend a heck of a lot more. But you could be a massive business, with a really big turnover, but you're mainly doing owned and earned organic, PR. You don't need to have a huge budget. So it really doesn't relate. It's not a very good correlation at all, this one. Changes in budget was, again, quite interesting. So, and again, this pretty much spread pretty evenly. So there was only 9% of the businesses that were going to reduce their budget compared with last year. 30% were going to keep it in the same range. So, if it was 1 to 5 last year, it's 1 to 5 again this year. And 27% said they were going to increase it. So if you look at that together, that's a big chunk of businesses that are, are going to 57% that are actually going to either not going to change or going to increase. Wasn't able to break it down across all of the groups. If you then look at the percentage split on digital versus last year, what we noticed was that 0%, I'm hoping these are people that aren't going to spend it on digital rather than they haven't got a budget, because I did specifically say that. But what we see is that the proportion of people that are going to be spending on digital has actually reduced. So you've got a bigger number of people are spending offline. So you can see if you go round from 0 to 40%, it's basically from here to here. So that means that you've got more people that are spending on offline than you did last time. Okay, so these are the word clouds to indicate what channels and techniques people want to invest in. Unfortunately, the way word clouds work is they pick up the individual word. So you could have virtual events and live events and you get a massive event. But you can see that training was really dominant, virtual, online, very high. TikTok, didn't appear last year at all. So, and LinkedIn's quite high as well. So you've got a lot of people investing in virtual events and online training, which doesn't surprise me at all. Then what you've got is emerging technologies. AI, CRM to me isn't really an emerging technology. It's been around for a long time. So the main things that people were mentioning were AI. There was automation was there as well. A few people on the metaverse, blockchain, NFTs, and then lots of, little things that were being mentioned, one-offs. Help or training needed. So paid media, PPC, paid social, SEO, TikTok, lots of people were mentioning those. I think I've actually got the list. Oh no, I haven't brought it across. So you can see that at least people are recognizing that some of the areas where they need help are the areas that have previously come out as being quite weak. And so paid media is really important. Again, TikTok was mentioned quite a lot, automation, SEO. So things like content marketing, PR, I think that was in combination with digital PR. But things like creativity, web, videos, they really weren't mentioned at all in here. Branding had a little mention there. So that's it. So I don't think there's many questions. I'm just going to see. I'll just bring over
I've got a quick question, Anne.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Go ahead.
Yeah, just in terms of what you've analysed, what's taken you by surprise the most?
I think I'm surprised how consistent it is with last year. Although,
wow.
Yeah, I was expecting it to have changed more. I thought that, there would have been more, I mean, obviously there's more people that want to grow this year than last year, and they want to spend more money than last year, which is great. There's a few technologies that have emerged. TikTok's been mentioned a lot, which doesn't surprise me. I mean, it's overtaken a lot of other platforms in popularity, and I think it's one of the most popular webinars that we've run. So again, that's another webinar. I'm still quite shocked how some do so badly. Conversion rate optimization, marketing automation, the paid channels. And I don't know, I just would expect more people to be invested in these, because I think I'm probably a little bit biased, but conversion rate optimization and marketing automation, they're not expensive techniques. Once you've either got the software or invested the time in it, it's not like you've got to pay out every month. But, if you can improve the effectiveness of your email, or because you're using marketing automation, or you can automate your processes, or you can make your website more effective, there seems to be a lot of focus on the things that people know, which is sort of organic content.
Is that maybe most comfortable with?
Yeah, a lot of the traditional stuff that people have probably been doing for 15 years. I think marketers, to me, look really risk adverse. And unless you're running a really successful e-commerce business and you've got to invest in a lot of new techniques, or you're a massive company and got, or you're a bigger company and you've got a bigger budget, because I said size and that doesn't necessarily correlate. Unless you've got a bigger budget, people just don't seem to be experimenting at all. So yeah, I think that's really interesting. But it's quite reassuring to see that so many people want to grow, and they want to invest in marketing. But we definitely are barking up the wrong tree, up the right tree rather. We're trying to do the skill. We're trying to do all the skills.
You knew what you meant. It's a Friday.
Yeah, the analysis is quite grueling. It's a lot of spreadsheets. There's a lot of slicing and dicing the data. So it's not for the faint-hearted, the analysis.
Right, I caught you off guard with that in a way. So next week, everybody, Ed is presenting about the state of analytics and Google Analytics in 2022, and he's got a wealth of experience. It's going to be a really good one. And I think just in light of what Anne said as well, there does seem to be a bit of a knowledge gap and a digital skills gap. And obviously we've got the boot camp. So I'll just put a link in to the chat just for that, because you can sign up, and it's a grant funded opportunity for you all. And, the training, alone is worth like £3,000. And if you're a priority group, it's free. And there's lots of different things. So drop us a line. And also, if I can just ask as well, bit of a cheeky thing, but I hope you don't mind, but we do put a lot of effort into this. And if you can leave us a review, that'd be really, really good, because Anne puts her heart and soul into this, and she's so altruistic, aren't you, Anne?
Yeah, this was a bit of a labour of love, this one. So this was a lot of...
It's so interesting. And I think, it will be available in demand for anybody who joined at 9:30. Apologies about, there was a bit of an admin issue. We've never had that, not for the last 6 months or so. But apologies for that. But you can catch up. And obviously the handout's available as well. So take a look at that.
Yeah, Sux wrote a nice comment. It is a real, slice it and dice it, pivot tables, using third-party tools like word clouds and maps and things. I mean, what we're going to do is take that raw data and try and make it into more of an ebook. But it's difficult benchmark yourself. I mean, most people have no idea what other people are doing, you know whether your 2% marketing is average or below average for your sector. So the whole idea of doing this was really to try and give some context of how well you're doing. So we will publish a bit more of a fuller version, and I'll put a few more of the. I think there was about 2 charts that was in last year that I didn't have time to do this year, but also maybe look for what looks interesting and dive into a few of the things in a bit more detail. Excellent.
Okay.
Well, thanks very much, everybody. I hope you have a great weekend. Ruth's just asking about what was the acronym? Real situation, case study. Yeah, I think that's such an interesting. We have tried to do case studies before and had guest speakers, but they've not always been that popular. I think it's difficult for some of the
because it can be niche or sector.
Maybe. Yeah, I mean, it might be worth us putting in some of our award entries when we've been given permission, you know, like the Diwali award, which was really good. The NHS one that we won a load of prizes. So I think that might be quite an interesting thing to do. Yeah. Anyway, I mean, I do try and, so CRM is customer relation management or marketing. I do try and put the full version in, but you are right. When I'm speaking, you know, it might say it on the slide, but I do slip it into the acronyms. It's
really hard when you've been in the industry a long time, though, isn't it? I've got to say.
Anyway, I know everybody's got other things to do at 10, so thanks very much. We'll send the video out in a couple of hours, but have a great weekend, everybody, and we'll see you next week.
Bye. 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 Bye.